Mark Twain wrote, "If the statistics are right, the Jews constitute but 1% of the human race. It suggests a nebulous dim puff of stardust lost in the blaze of the Milky Way. Properly, the Jew ought hardly be heard of, but he is heard of, has always been heard of. He's as prominent on the planet as any other people, and his commercial importance is extravagantly out of proportion to the smallness of his bulk. His contributions to the world's list of great names in literature, science, art, music, finance, medicine, and abstruse learning are also way out of proportion to the weakness of his numbers." This is actually a gross exaggeration. Today, the Jewish people make up less than 0.25% of world population. Now, math was never my strong point. But if you're going to round 0.2% to the closest number, it would be 0. The Jewish people make up 0% of the world population. Now, how does it make sense that a people who make up 0% of world population, how have we had such an impact on the world? As Mark Twain said, the Jew ought hardly be heard of, and yet we cannot escape the fact that the Jewish people have contributed so much to our world. I'm Menachem Lehrfield, and this is 0%, where we explore the outsized impact of the Jewish people. In our first season, we try to look inside the black box, try to understand what are some of the things that led to the enormous success of a people that make up just 0% of world population. Our second season was a little bit different. Because of what was happening in the world, our second season focused on the devastating war taking place in Israel. Beginning with the attacks on October 7th and the reflections and perspectives from on the ground in Israel and reflections from here in America about what was going on in Israel. Our second season was very sporadic. Episodes dropped whenever there was something I had to share. I'm really excited to get back to regular episodes of 0% with our Season 3. In Season 3, we're going to explore Jews by choice. We're going to look at why certain people decide to join the Jewish people. As Mark Twain mentioned as we started the episode, we should not have ever even heard of a Jew, and yet people choose to join the Jewish people. Why? I hope that we can learn these tremendous lessons for what inspired people to join Judaism. And my hope is that those who are Jewish by birth can, instead of looking for every other ism under the sun, can begin to explore the treasure we have in our own backyard. We can often gain a new appreciation for what we have by looking through the eyes of somebody who can see everything with a fresh perspective, somebody who didn't grow up with this Jewish heritage. Throughout our history, going all the way back to Ruth the Moabite, who was perhaps the most famous convert in Jewish history. Ruth became the great-grandmother of King David, and her story embodies loyalty and dedication to the Jewish people and has had such a profound impact on the Jewish narrative. So all the way from Ruth to some of the most influential sages of the Talmud, to Onkelos, who was the son of the Roman emperor who converted to Judaism and provided one of the most important translations we have of the Torah. Jews of choice have always impacted the Jewish people in a remarkable way. In fact, the Medrash explains, and it's brought down in the Talmud in Tractate of Pesachim 87b, that one of the most important reasons for the Almighty exiling the Jewish people was so that converts might join them, that we were dispersed across the world in order to be that light unto the nations and to allow those who want to join the Jewish people, to give them the opportunity to make a contribution, to make us the people that, again, are just 0% of population, but have had such an enormous impact. The first story we're going to hear is from a personal friend of ours, Leah Schiermeyer, who grew up in the Bible Belt and chose a Jewish way of life together with her husband and family. We're going to hear that episode next month. Before we do, I want to just jog our memory as to what 0% is really all about. So you're going to hear a little bit from our very first episode, and hopefully next month, on October 30th, we will hear from Leah Schiermeyer and her inspiring story. Moving forward, 0% will drop new episodes, hopefully every single month on the last Wednesday of the month. So make sure that you're subscribed so you don't miss an episode. And now, without further ado, let's listen to parts of our very first episode of 0%. And therein lies the exquisite irony of Jewish history. Although Jews possess no military, political, or economic threat, and were never more than a tiny fraction of the world's population, we make up 0%. And yet, we were always considered a major power in the eyes of mankind, especially by those who hate us. Why? Because of the message that we carry. We carry a message that we believe was given to us by God. And whether you believe in God or not, the messages contained within the Torah have already revolutionized the world and have led to so many different types of success. After all, these are God's instructions for living. And if these are His instructions, they must be right. Now, who says you should listen to me? Who says you should listen to what we're about to talk about? I think it's worthwhile, because I think the Jewish people are the longest running case study on success. And don't just take it from me. The second president of the United States, John Adams, says, and I'll quote, "I will insist the Hebrews have done more to civilize men than any other nation. If I were an atheist and believed in blind eternal fate, I should still believe that fate had ordained the Jews to be the most essential instrument for civilizing nations. They are the most glorious nation that ever inhabited the earth, and have influenced the affairs of mankind more and more happily than any other nations, ancient or modern." The non-Jewish historian Paul Johnson wrote, "All the great conceptual discoveries of the human intellect seem obvious and inescapable once they have been revealed. But it requires a special genius to formulate them for the first time. The Jew had this gift. To them we owe the idea of equality before the law, both divine and human, of sanctity of life and the dignity of the human person, of the individual conscience, and so a personal redemption, of collective conscience, and so of social responsibility, of peace as an abstract ideal and love as the foundation of justice, and many other items which constitute the moral furniture of the human mind. Without Jews, it might have been a much emptier place." Now, we're somewhat uncomfortable with the topic of Jewish success. When we look at the topic and we talk about it, we get noticeably uncomfortable, especially Jews. And when someone talks about it, there's almost like this underlying feeling of anti-Semitism and where are they going with this. But it's really hard to deny the numbers. I mean, the numbers are staggering. The Jewish population today, Jews make up roughly 0.2% of the world population. If we were rounding that number to the closest number to 0.2 is 0. So we make up 0% of world population. Now, making up 0% of the world population, we would expect that people would not have ever heard of the Jewish people. And yet, the Jewish people, for some reason, seem to defy all of the laws of numbers and statistics. The Jewish contribution to the world is enormous, coming from a people that make up 0% of the population. And the numbers don't lie. And this is just going with one piece of information. The Nobel Prizes. The Jews have won a total of 194 out of 850. If you look at the percentage of the Jewish people versus the overall population, we would expect the Jews to have won 1.7 Nobel Prizes. Winning 194 Nobel Prizes is quite remarkable. And when you look at the number, it's actually quite staggering. We have won 11,411% more Nobel Prizes than we would have expected. So that's an overrepresentation by over 11,000%. That's pretty impressive. But we don't need to stop there. I mean, I have here, I started just today going through a little bit of research on, what you'd call Jewish success. And it's really staggering because any realm or area that you want to look at as successful, Jews, despite our small size and despite the fact that for most of our history we were not allowed to compete fairly, nonetheless we've managed to succeed. And I understand that this might be making some people uncomfortable, but again, I don't know how we can go against, facts are facts. And, it's not just the scientific contributions of Einstein to modern physics or Freud to psychoanalysis. No matter what your benchmark of success is, it's hard to deny Jewish success. If it's strictly money, dollars and cents. So it's quite interesting to note that according to Forbes, Jews make up 20% of the top 50 billionaires. And that's not to mention household names like Goldman Sachs, Rothschild, Warburg, Kravis and Roberts, Wells Fargo. Again, keeping in mind we make up 0% of the population. If you're looking at the world of technology, can you imagine a world without Intel with Grove, or Google with Brennan Page, Oracle with Ellison, Microsoft that had Ballmer, Dell with Michael Dell, Qualcomm, Facebook. And it's not just tech, we could say the same thing about medicine. Now, the nice Jewish doctor is a nice stereotype, but it comes from somewhere. You look at Jewish contributions to medical research, like the invention of Prozac and Valium, the polio vaccine, radiation, chemotherapy, the artificial kidney dialysis, the defibrillator, the cardiac pacemaker, vaccination against hepatitis B, the pill, looking at, modern Israeli technology, the Rewalk. It's become famous through Glee, but it's a device that essentially allows a paraplegic to get up and walk. These things are unheard of. You want to go through entertainment? So aside from the fact that 6 out of the 8 major Hollywood studios were started by Jews, you look at the credits at the end of a movie and it looks like Hebrew school roll call. I mean, it's like Levine, Goldberg. I mean, come on. I don't even want to go through law. I mean, naming 3 Jews in a row already sounds like a law firm. Right? And for good reason. Jews make up the top partners in top law firms all over the country. You look at every different area, and again, I have, Jewish inventions, jeans, lipstick, the ballpoint pen, instant coffee, the television remote, traffic lights, Scotch Guard, the flexi straws, which are now going to become illegal because they're destroying the environment, genetic engineering, the nuclear chain reactor, movies with sound, videotape, color television, instant photography, holography, discount stores, pawn shops, the shopping cart, did you know that? Ready-to-wear clothing industry, the fax, microphone, the optical fiber cable, laser, cellular technology, videotape recorder, drip irrigation, the pager, the walkie-talkie, and the list goes on. Gary Goldman has this whole comedy bit where he goes through many, many different Jewish inventions. And he said, so many people hate the Jews. If you want to, hate on us, then stop using all our technology. He says, you should pick up your crippled polio, infested whatever, and drag yourself to your black and white TV, because you can't use a remote, and turn it on, and then find something to watch that's not written, directed, and produced by a Jew. You're not going to find it. Yeah. So we can feel uncomfortable about the idea that Jews are somewhat successful, but it's there. Now, how do we explain the phenomenon? I think that's where there's room for being uncomfortable or not being uncomfortable. There's room for discussion. And that, I think, is really what I want to try to tackle throughout the next couple of weeks. Why and how have Jews been so successful? I don't think we can deny the fact that they have been successful, that we are successful. The question is why and how. So I've heard many people say that Jews are just naturally smarter, they're naturally more gifted. Aside from the fact that I don't think that that's ever been proven scientifically, that does sound very bigoted, and if somebody said that to me, I would imagine that person would be uncomfortable, and I would be uncomfortable, and for good reason. I don't think that Jewish success has as much to do with the Jews as it does with Judaism. I believe very strongly that there's something about Judaism that produces success. And the huge difference between that is that it's replicatable. It's something that we can learn from. If Jewish success has more to do with Judaism than it does have to do with the Jews, then it's not that we're successful because we're a specific group of people. We're successful because of what we believe, because of what we've been taught, and because of what we do. So you'll ask me, when you look at this list of the 20% of Forbes top 50, they're not practicing Jews. They're not people who are doing all the things we're going to talk about now. So I'll explain with a concept called the cut flower phenomena. So when I take a flower and I cut off the stem, I detach it from its growing source, it doesn't instantly die, right? I can put it in water. I can maintain that flower for a couple of days, maybe a week and a half before it starts to wither. But it still retains the same life it had when it was attached to the plant. The same is true in terms of our cultural identity. That even as we are, so to speak, cut from the source, even if we are no longer doing all the things that might have produced the result of Jewish success, the very fact that it's been ingrained in us and in our families for so many years, if we have a 3,000-year chain of telling your children that you can change the world, you know what? You're going to change the world. If you spent 3,000 years saying you're going to change the world, you're going to do it. And even if I don't still give these messages over to myself and to my children, and even if I no longer participate in these practices, it's still ingrained in the national identity and DNA of the Jewish people. But there's a limit to how long that lasts. And that's the idea of the cut flower phenomenon. It'll last for a little bit. It'll last in small bursts. But eventually that flower is going to wither and it's going to disappear. I'm back. It's live now, not the pre-recording from 2 years ago. The question is, if we want to ensure that we can get back to what it is that makes us the people that we are, what are those things? What are the practices, the beliefs that we need to learn ourselves and teach to our children to ensure that our cut flower doesn't just wither and die? I hope that the stories that we hear this season will inspire us to learn and understand parts of Judaism that inspired these individuals and will allow us to reconnect to our Judaism in a more impactful way. So please join me the last Wednesday of each month as we explore these stories. And if you're interested in all of the Joy podcasts, you can now subscribe to a podcast called JOI to the World. Make sure you enter that entire phrase, JOI to the world, not just JOI. If you enter just JOI, you'll get all kinds of things that I would not recommend you looking at or seeing. So just make sure you're going and looking for JOI to the world wherever you get your podcasts. And that is a weekly podcast that will have all of our new podcasts with a fresh episode each week. So that will include Yada Yada Yiddish, which is our new podcast that explores Jewish lessons we learned from the series Seinfeld. It will have Kids Say the Deepest Things, which looks at deep things that kids say. It will have a podcast with me and my wife Sarah called Reconnect, which explores Jewish relationships, or rather relationships from a Jewish perspective, and 0% and Dear Rabbi, where we answer your questions about Judaism. So if you are looking for all the Joy podcasts in one place, that's your address. If you're just looking for 0%, don't forget to subscribe to this one. Either way, please leave us a 5-star review so others can find this and our other podcasts as well.